This is Moral of the Story. Interesting people telling their favorite short stories and then breaking them down to understand what makes them so good. I'm your host, Max Japovsky. Today's guest is Adam Rubin, best-selling author, magician, improv comedian, lover of funk music, winner of laughing competitions, a fluent speaker of Japanese after 3 glasses of sake, and above all, a storyteller on a mission to ensure that the art form stays alive and well for generations to come. Join me as we dissect and reconstruct Adam's prolific journey like a surgeon, cutting for the very first time. Once upon a time, in a magical land called Hudson Valley, there was a little boy named Adam Rubin who loved creativity as much as his dad hated the squirrels that feasted on his backyard bird feeders. More on that later. Adam has always embraced the silly and playful in life. He managed to hang on to that irreverence as he grew up, channeling his creativity into a visual communications degree from Washington University in St. Louis, where he studied advertising. As an aside, since we graduated only a year apart, we might have even met in college and become the best of friends had WashU not waitlisted yours truly. But I digress. While at the school that waitlisted me, I'm over it, I promise, Adam fell in love with improv, starting the group Suspicious of Whistlers, which continues to perform to this day. After graduating, Adam moved to Chicago, where he worked at Leo Burnett, writing McDonald's Happy Meal commercials by day and immersing himself in its rich improv comedy scene by night. Audiences were treated to Adam's storytelling talents and comedic sensibilities at the Annoyance Theater and I.O., and the creative director may well have ridden off into the proverbial sunset on his proverbial stallion, but one day, a mutual friend introduced Adam to the man who would become his closest collaborator and with whom Adam would dive headfirst into a career that not even his vivid imagination had contemplated: children's book author. Their first collaboration, Those Darn Squirrels, inspired by those darn squirrels that his dad was so fond of, would go on to win a Borders Original Voices Award and inspire a TDS anthology appreciated by kids and adults alike. Adam stayed in the ad world until he had multiple books on the bestseller list, at which point he thought to himself, "Self, I think it's time we go do this book thing for real, for real." And so he did, writing such classics as Robo Sauce, Gladys, The Magic Chicken, El Chupacabras, and Dragons Love Tacos, a book that I read to a rousing reception from my daughter's first grade class. This could have easily been the final act in Adam's journey, but no, because magic. You see, Adam believes that writing is where the magic is, yes, but magic was the writing on Adam's wall before actual writing was in his life. As a 12-year-old at summer camp, Adam was astonished by his friend's magic trick involving buttons jumping from hand to hand. Adam being Adam, he could not let it go, leading to sleepless nights spent studying the entirety of Mark Wilson's Encyclopedia of Magic. This obsession would ignite the flame that, although perhaps dormant during college, came out in force when Adam quit his agency job and found himself with time on his hands. The fan of impossible objects, mechanical puzzles, and optical illusions joined the Art of Play, a company started by his 2 friends that he helped expand into a full-fledged wonder emporium that embraces power of curiosity and gives Adam the opportunity to create objects and puzzles that allow him to share his favorite emotion, astonishment, with curious minds the world over. And in his capacity as a magician, Adam has worked with legends such as David Blaine, David Copperfield, and others. As this is now approaching one of the longest bios I've read on the show, and I'm starting to feel like that award winner whose thank yous are getting excessive and the producers are about to cut the mic, here are a few more random facts about Adam that you should probably know. I'm officially going to bullet points. He released this also to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of Dragons Love Tacos. No, it was not spicy. During the pandemic, he co-created Bizarre Brooklyn, an immersive theater experience on the history of the borough. He currently has a Jack in the Box puzzle on Kickstarter, so you should pre-order that now, as it will probably win an award. So, Adam Rubin, doing his part to make sure that we are raising a generation of untamed creatives and ferociously curious intellectuals. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Full life, probably more detail than I remember.
Well, I am glad that you timed it because I do feel like it was probably one of the longer bios I've done and completely worth it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. I do have a very important question before we get started, which is, should we actually be suspicious of whistlers? And if so, why?
Well, there's a lot of, I think the generations following mine, which is now, geez, 15 years or something like that. Is it coming up on 20 years? Might be. I don't know they like the name very much. They find it to be a bit of a tongue twister, suspicious of whistlers. And so there's definitely been some controversy over the name in the more recent years. And from what I know, younger people refer to the group as Spish, which makes me want to puke. But hey, you gotta defer to youth. They've got it's theirs now. So the original idea, I guess, was just some little cartoon of a guy whistling with an axe behind his back. It's funny you
Oh,
bring
I
up whistling
see.
though, because it's definitely it's something I wish I was better at. It's something I've always wanted to be great at, and I've never been able to figure out how to make that really loud sound, like mom in the parking lot of Disneyland, or like that sonorous melody like Andrew Bird can do. So I'm a little, I'm a
Same.
little, I'm interested in whistling lessons. If anybody that listens to this has an expertise there, please
If
contact
any
me.
listener is a whistler, that is actually something that that is a skill that I have tried multiple times to acquire and failed miserably each time. There's the whistling just with your mouth, which
Yeah,
I guess all whistling is with your mouth, but this one is without your fingers.
yeah, yeah,
And I can do like one note if I'm lucky, but I can kind of sometimes whistle when I put my middle and index fingers into my mouth, but
yeah.
then I don't usually do that because then I feel like I have to wash my hands before I do that, which kind of defeats the purpose of using it in the moment when you immediately need to whistle very urgently.
Mm.
So yeah, I'll definitely take whoever offers up on the lessons as well.
Whistling lessons
So
wanted.
whistling lessons wanted. Yes, consider the ad posted. So you are here to tell us a story. Before
Yeah.
we begin, do you want to set the stage? Is there anything we should know?
Well, as you had mentioned, I was in Chicago for a solid 7 years. Really enjoyed that city. Love that place. But at some point, I moved back east, where I grew up, and was living in New York. So I had to stop wearing fleeces to bars, and I had to, uh, get on Instagram and all this sort of stuff that you had to do in New York in 2011 if you were of the dating age and a single person out there. Tinder was brand new, I think. So it was an exciting time in New York. I was probably around 35 years old. No, 33 years old when this story takes place. I am working at, no, you know what? I had recently quit my job as a creative director at Firstborn. So I'm living it up at this point. I had just become a full-time author. I'm single in New York, and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do next. That's the state I'm in at the beginning of this story.
I love it. All right, let's get into it. Tell me a story.
So my good friend Corey Mintz, who you mentioned in your introduction, the friend who introduced me to Daniel Selmary, a guy who changed the course of my life entirely, and a great friend, is the kind of New York personality that just can't walk into a room or get on a subway car without recognizing someone that he knows. He knows all the people in the city, what's going on, where to go, all the fun events. And that evening, he had invited me to go to an exhibition of pizza box artwork that was put on by a guy named Scott, who does Scott's Pizza Tours here in New York. He's a pizza expert, world class pizza aficionado. He collects the pizza boxes that pizzas come in, and he had decorated a gallery with all these pizzas. It was great. It was cool to see. They're from all over the world, different languages, different art styles. It was very quirky and fun. And needless to say, there was a lot of free pizza at this event. So we stuffed our faces, admired the pizza boxes, and then when we left the gallery, it was like 8 o'clock at night, and we didn't know what to do. We're full. We don't. So the only thing we could think of at that time, we were in Williamsburg, uh, walking around. Neither one of us lived around there, but we thought, what's good to drink when you're full of pizza? Sake. It's the lightest, crispiest. Let's go find some sake, drink some sake to add it to the pizza in our bellies. Little Google search, and we wind up at a place I've never been before and have never been since, called Bozu, Japanese place in Williamsburg. And when we get to the door, they say, sorry, we're fully booked. It's totally crowded. There's no way we can get seats. We say, okay, that's all right. We'll hang out for 5 minutes and see if something opens up. Just at that moment, two guys get up from the bar and we get our seats at the bar, order a bottle of sake, and we're sitting there happily feeling like, hey, the night couldn't get any better. Well, in walks this group of 6 women. Tall, beautiful, loud, laughing, and they get seated at this table in the middle of the restaurant. And everybody's looking at them because they're making a lot of noise and they're all dressed to the nines, and they're just they're attracting a lot of attention. But I notice that every time I glance over there, there's one woman in particular, this dark-haired woman with these piercing eyes, and every time I look over there, she catches me looking. And the first time I'm a little embarrassed, and the second time I'm intrigued, and the third time I figure, well, that means she's looking at me too. So we finish this bottle of sake, and I'm feeling brave, and I tell my friend, hey, you leave first, okay? And I'm going to hang back just for a minute so I can go talk to this woman. And he says, don't do that. Don't interrupt these ladies, or they're minding their own business. They're trying to have a nice meal. This is not the kind of thing I would normally do, but I just felt like there was some sort of connection, and I would have kicked myself if I left without doing something about it. So he goes, and I, as casually as possible, walk over to the table and say, excuse me, I hate to interrupt, but I couldn't help but notice you from across the restaurant, and I wanted to come over and introduce myself. And the table just goes quiet. Her 5 friends just like stop talking. And I was just talking to her. I wasn't talking to anybody else. And she's like taken aback for a minute, and she says, oh, well, I'm Tamis. And at that moment, like a lot of the listeners now, I had no idea what she said. I didn't catch that name at all. I wasn't, I now know what it was. But at that point, I was like, keep moving forward. Don't let that trip you up. I said, I don't usually do anything like this, but I'd love to take you out for a cup of coffee sometime, or a drink if you're interested. And she turns a little red and says, I'm flattered, but I live in California. I live in LA. So I can. I said, oh, all right. Well, listen, it was so nice to meet you. I'm sorry again for interrupting your dinner. I hope you all have a lovely time. And I leave. And I was feeling pretty good because she said she was flattered. So I go outside, and Corey's waiting there, just dying to hear what happened. How'd it go? I said it went pretty well. She didn't throw a drink in my face, and that's it. That's it. He says, "Hey, it's like Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take," and I agree. So we kind of walk off into the night, kind of abuzz with the possibility of New York, and all of a sudden I hear Adam, and I turn around, and there's this gorgeous woman standing in the doorway waving at me, and it's Tamis. And she says, hey, I might move back. Why don't you take my number? And I do. And I took her number. She goes back inside, and I turn around, and Corey says, what did you say to that woman? I was like, I don't know. I just introduced myself. I asked her out for coffee, and all of a sudden we hear, Corey. I turn around, and there's this other beautiful woman standing in the doorway, beckoning to Corey. And Corey looks at me, and I look at Corey, and he walks up. He's dumbfounded. He says, yes. She says, you forgot your credit card. And she hands him his credit card back. And the best part of this story is that I'm now married to Tamis, and we've been married for 5 years now.
Yeah. Is Corey married to the woman that came in with the credit card?
No, she was just a waitress at the restaurant. He is married. He's got 2 beautiful children. He now lives in LA. Yeah.
That's the story from your perspective. Now, how would Tamis tell the story from her perspective? Because I know you've talked about this.
Yeah. So she has a couple details that she likes to add. One was that, and I didn't mention this because I think it's impossible for me to have known this, and I think it spoils the ending of the story if you know that I know the whole, both sides. But uh, she says that she got up at some point during the dinner because we were making eye contact, and when at some point during the dinner she got up and walked by me because she had to walk by us to get to the bathroom, and she walked by me. She says to check the vibe and the energy, to see if they like do a chemistry test somehow. In walking by me, I guess you could. I don't know I don't know what it was about, but that was an important test for her, and I passed, I guess. So when she went back, I mean, she was clearly like we were definitely checking each other out, and so I felt I wouldn't normally approach a strange woman in the middle of dinner with her friends, but it felt like there was a little bit of a invitation. Yeah. She also will mention that when she said, take my number once we were outside. Oh, so, okay. Okay. Also, the part that I didn't hear is when I left the restaurant after I had said the table stayed silent for a while, and they're all looking at her, and she says, should I go after him? And they all go, yes, go after him. So it was she got a little peer pressure to follow up, to make that bold move of the beckoning to me on the threshold of the restaurant. And the other point that she likes to make, which I don't know, is I guess is relevant, is when she said take my number, I took out a pen from my pocket and went to write it on my hand. And she said, don't you have an iPhone? And luckily I did. I think if I had a Samsung, she wouldn't have gone out with me. I guess so. I guess that's such a weird preference people have. But I have heard from other single people that if they get a green bubble back on iMessage, that it's a no-go. Which is a
deal breaker.
Very strange deal breaker.
Which is a little sad, because what if the other person just didn't have, reception and it had to be sent as a text message, or if maybe they accidentally send out of their iCloud? Like, how many marriages never happened because somebody just didn't have reception and got back a green bubble?
This is just one more reason we should all be using WhatsApp.
Yeah, I agree. It just takes the guesswork out of it. Yeah. It's technology agnostic.
Yeah.
So when you were sitting at the bar, did you have your backs to them, or was it one of those bars where you could just kind of look off to the side?
It was a corner bar. I guess I didn't paint the picture entirely, but it was a corner bar, so I could see their table without turning around. I could look across the restaurant and see the restaurant, whereas my friend, we were at the corner of the bar, so we kind of had a good vantage point for the whole place.
Isn't it so interesting how, if we are just open to certain opportunities that present themselves in life, our lives can take entirely different directions?
Yeah, well, so that's the evil perspective on the story in my own head, is like, well, what if I had gone up to more women in bars or at restaurants and just introduced myself? What would my life might have been like? But I think I got the right one. When we first got together, it was a long distance thing at first. So it was very romantic, and there was a lot of pining and letters and all these things. And I couldn't help but thinking about it like a meteor hitting the Earth. These two things colliding out of the galaxy of possibility. These just the infinitesimally small chances of this happening. If I hadn't gone to the bar, if we hadn't gotten sake, if all these things that there was really no way we would have met otherwise. And she was in New York, but she was in Williamsburg in the fashion scene and going to warehouse raves. It's like, we never would have met. That was not the world that I was inhabiting.
Or if those two guys didn't happen to get up from their chairs.
Right. If we hadn't gotten that particular seat at the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, where I was going with the comment was, what if you had not walked up to her? Not what if you walked up to all the other women that.
Yeah. It was as cliche as it sounded. It was absolutely love at first sight. Like, I wasn't being that vulnerable even with myself to admit it, but like at that moment I was like, I'm going to marry that woman.
Wow, you were that sure?
It was something, it was like lightning strikes. I can't, you can't help but use these cliches when you talk
Yeah.
about this sort of stuff because so many people are it's such a passionate subject that people have talked about so many times. But it the only semi original thing I can even think of is that when we met each other, when we started spending time together, it felt like coming home, and it felt like this was the place I was supposed to be, and it still does, which is nice.
That's a great analogy. And so, did you actually go to California and take her out to coffee, or was it more of a phone call thing at first?
I, Well, I don't want to be too well. So she was going back and forth. She was working in the fashion industry as a menswear designer at the time, and she was going back and forth to China from LA, and so she would often have little stopovers in New York, and she would make it so that she could spend a day or two to see her friends. And this one particular time, she was going to spend time with me. Our first date, the first time we had seen each other after that first encounter. And I got crazy trying to find the right restaurant, where to book, and what to do, and just driving myself insane and trying to get these tables and calling in favors, and I had this whole plan of what was going to happen after. She came to my apartment, and we never left. We never went to dinner. We just like hung out and walked around the neighborhood, and just I don't even know if we ate anything. Like it was intense.
You know what that makes me think of is the first experience was unplanned, sort of sudden and very, very organic. And
Yeah.
it turned out wonderfully.
Yeah.
Like it was super unexpected and had the best possible ending. The second experience, the date, you tried to recreate the spontaneity of the first experience by controlling everything, finding the best restaurant, the best table, calling in all your favors. Because now there were things at stake. Like,
There was an expectation, or I don't know what. There was at least time to think.
well, you also were probably a little bit anxious about, can I live up to these expectations that maybe she has of me now that I'm this, sort of spontaneous, mysterious guy that gets up from the bar and says, I never do this, but can I
Yeah,
take you
true.
out to coffee? She was smitten after you passed her chemistry test, right? The walking chemistry
Right, to
test,
walk
which,
by.
the walk by is probably a thing. And life again dictated that no, you can't control these things. And so you ended up not doing any of that stuff. And again, had a super spontaneous, organic, evening where you just walked around and enjoyed each other's company.
Yeah, it's rare to make a romantic connection that deep with someone, obviously, but it's also rare to make just any sort of connection but it happens. It's less rare where you meet a new person and you just fall into a conversation where you're like, this person's going to be my friend forever.
Yeah,
I love that feeling, and where you could just talk. I have friends like that where we could sit and do anything, road trips. It doesn't matter. It's the kind of person where you're like, you don't have to make a plan because
yeah,
you just know whatever you do, you're going to be bullshitting and enjoying each other's company. It's so
totally,
immensely, no matter what, that it doesn't really matter the venue.
totally. I used to think, when I was in high school, I was not popular at all. I was, kind of I was crazy and always very loud, but I was kind of this um, outcast that was, and I'm an immigrant, so English, by that point I had learned it, but I definitely didn't understand like the cultural norms or, I didn't play sports. Like I wasn't sort of in with the cool kids. And I really desperately wanted to be in with the cool kids. And because I thought that every time they get together, something profound happens, some profound adventure or some incident that turns into this crazy story that then they have these inside jokes about when they're in
Like the
school,
movies.
like the movies. And what I came to learn later in life is that actually the majority of those hangouts are completely uneventful and very sort of unplanned. You just go over to somebody's house and you hang out with them. And only after you can accept the fact that the majority of times you hang out with somebody will be completely just uneventful scenarios, only then can you become open to uh, some of those things actually turning into those crazy stories. Like when you were in Japan, for example, right? And you guys were walking around and all of a sudden you learned about this laughing competition. And you're like, let's go check that out. And you're like,
Yeah.
let's actually participate in it. And then you ended up winning it. That would have never happened if you were like, no, we have to plan this whole thing out. We have to do A, B, and C before lunch. Then we have lunch at this place. Then we do D, E, and F. Like that shit would have never happened.
Yeah, well, I think that's the most fun part of traveling. That's why it doesn't, it's always a good idea to leave a little bit of uncertainty in your plan when you travel. I don't like to make too many plans. I'll plan a few things. You need to buy tickets for certain places or museums or take a reservation at a restaurant at some point, but I won't plan out the whole day because yeah, then you rob yourself of all those possibilities. That's the best part about exploring the world is
Yeah,
not knowing what you're going to find.
that's exactly right. I think that's where I got some of my travels wrong when I was backpacking through Europe by myself. I felt like I needed to plan everything out, and there's so many things to see. Like if you go to any of the European capitals, you could spend a full week on attractions that all need tickets, and you could plan your entire day out and leave nothing to chance. And I think I was so uncomfortable with the uncertainty that, if I don't plan everything out, then there's a chance that I'm not going to have any fun. There's a chance that I'm going to have an incredible experience that can only happen unexpectedly, that I planned everything. And it wasn't until I was older when I was like, oh, no, actually, you can't plan everything because you can only walk into a random restaurant and either meet the love of your life or have an incredible conversation with the chef or learn something new or run into somebody that tells you about some underground thing that's happening that night and they're not
Yeah.
telling anybody. That's the only way to do that. But for a lot of people that have to have control and they're worried that if you don't plan an amazing evening, it will be a waste of time. They just miss out on that.
Yeah, I think that's sad but true. Is if you require control, then you relinquish some of that magic of the unplanned surprise.
Has that changed in you at all since since that time that you guys walked into that restaurant? Do you feel like you need to
No, no.
control
If
more things
anything,
now?
I'm encouraged to indulge that attitude even more. That was part of the thing about Bizarre Brooklyn was that it happened during the pandemic. The Bizarre Brooklyn was an interactive walking tour, sort of part historical, part magical. We used to say that everything you hear is true, but not everything you see is. And the real reaction we had to sitting inside and being stuck and everything feeling digital and cold and planned, like you said, like everything was had a starting point and there was almost no spontaneity at that point because of the situation of the world. And so we wanted to do this thing that felt like there was a surprise around every corner, that there were infinite possibilities within walking distance. And the thesis for the show was basically certainty is the enemy of discovery. So we tried to bring that to life for people, and it was really nice.
Sure. Yeah. Love that. Being able to get this sort of
Well, that
experience
was
on
the
them.
hardest part as we were workshopping the show with friends and family. The first couple times we had this feedback, we would ask for feedback, and everybody's note was the same, which was, "Oh, it's just so great to get out of the house." And we're like, "Okay, yeah, we understand the bar is low, but help us improve."
I don't actually care what we do. I just want to like step outside my front door.
Yeah, they were just like, "I got to put on a coat and like go outside. I saw other people. I saw them in real life."
Yeah, IRL. Yeah, I mean it's interesting being able to sort of I think as a creative, you have developed that muscle really well. I mean, you can't really come up with something. You could take, you can take, you know, a statue or whatever it was and turn it into, the story that then becomes Dragons Love Tacos, where you can take the backyard squirrels and is
Got the
this statue
statue
that you're
right
going to show me?
here. There he is.
That's the basis for Dragons Love Tacos.
Yeah, this thing was sitting on my dad's desk for years throughout my childhood. And I just always
That's
remembered it. It
amazing.
always struck me.
That's a really intricate dragon.
I think so.
That is, yeah.
I
Where
tracked down
does
the
he have like a
lady.
unicorn horn too?
Yeah, he's got a unicorn horn. He's got little wings in the back and
Yeah.
scales.
Yeah.
Pretty
That's
good.
amazing. And where'd the taco thing come from?
Well, I thought it kind of looks like a taco. I think that's a taco,
What is, oh, that's for sure a taco. Yeah, I
right?
can see that. Yes, that's absolutely a taco.
And it just kind of made sense to me that all dragons would love tacos. And by
Totally.
extension, there would be this beautiful tension that they couldn't eat anything spicy because of the whole fire breathing dilemma that they have.
Yeah. If he's representative of dragon kind, you can extrapolate that all dragons must love tacos.
Yeah.
You could take an idea like you could take a little statuette like that, or you can take a small idea, with the squirrels and turn it into a book, or you can take, an idea and turn it into, a magic trick. So you've worked that muscle extensively, and so it's, I think, hard for all creatives to look at, a blank slate or a timeline for a video editor and just be like, this can become anything. This can also become nothing, right?
Well, there's a
How did
big
you?
difference between work for hire and work for pleasure.
For sure.
So I was a mercenary for many years, and I used
Yeah.
my skills to the highest bidder. I rented my skills to the highest bidder, but and I was doing a lot of comedy back then, and my friends who were like working at adult video stores and stuff would say, "Oh man, I wish I could work in advertising. It's so great." They were watching Mad Men or something, and I would say, It's not like it seems on TV. Basically, you walk into a room, give somebody your best idea, and then they pay you to watch them fuck it up. So it was, it can be heartbreaking if you put too much of yourself in it. And the people I've seen go crazy in the ad world are the ones who convince themselves that their vision, their personal vision, is what the client is paying for, or who convince themselves that their talent is worthy of this $1 million budget that is in place in order to sell soft drinks. So you kind of got to keep an emotional distance to it. Like any work for hire, there sometimes are moments when you make something you're really proud of, or where it is important to exercise artistic integrity for the benefit of all parties involved. But you can only fight with people so much. They're the ones trying to sell chicken nuggets or life insurance or whatever it is, and you know you can only give them your best within that context. Like they want a specific thing, and they will dictate the parameters.
That's exactly how I felt when I had my video production company. I started it with these grandiose ideas of being this sought after creative house that would get to dictate the creative vision. And once we started signing, clients like Google and
Lofty.
Capital One, I was like, wow, like look at this. And then over time, I realized that a corporate video is a corporate video is a
Yeah.
corporate video, even if you're doing it for Capital One. And after a while, it sort of dawned on me that I was beginning to lose my passion for the thing that I loved so
Mm.
much, which was video, because I basically was forced to kowtow to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
And it the word that I use to describe that is tragic. Because if you are forced to do work for hire in the field that you're passionate about, and you end up becoming just another sort of drone in that field,
Mm.
for me, for a long time, video became, filmmaking became a casualty of that, which really is tragic. It's it's wonderful that you did not lose your creative spark, that it wasn't beat out of you by, all the ad agencies where ironically we're supposed to leverage it.
Well, it's dangerous to do what you love for a living. It's when it works out, it's the best possible scenario. And I have friends like that, lots of friends that do what they love and people pay them to do it and they're living the dream. But I know many other people who, just like you, started with a great passion for something and then it the light went out in their eyes and now they're industry hacks in whatever field, whatever their chosen field, and they found a new hobby. And I think the lesson in there is that you have to make weird shit on the side. Whatever it is you do, if you do video editing or you do copywriting, you have to keep one foot outside of the office to make things that make you happy, because that's the only way to really keep that spark alive. You can do something else. You could paint or sing or just, but if you consider your profession creative, I do think it is important to have creative pursuits outside of the office.
Is that the role that comedy played for you when you were working at, the
Yeah,
agencies in
comedy and
Chicago?
puzzles and magic and making video sketches and doing like freelance journalism. Like I just probably I think it probably was evident to all my employers throughout my entire career, but like it was never the most important thing in my life. I was there to do a job. They were paying me to be there and I was going to do as good of a job as I possibly could do. But I was not taking that work home with me. I was not staying up late at night worrying about the pitch. And in some ways, I think that made me better at the job because there was a very I think clients could feel it and they liked to work with me because they knew that I was there to help them and but there was a greater entity. It was not like I was some cog in the wheel. It was like I'm here to provide what I can for you in this context. And if you let me, we'll make something great. That was always kind of the attitude I had, which is potentially off-putting, but most clients seem uh, to appreciate it.
And I think crucially, your identity was not tied up in the thing you were creating at work, which allowed you to, kind of not be crushed if a client said, "Well, we don't like that."
Yeah, that's a tricky thing, becoming wrapped up in your job description. It's such a common question to be asked the very first time you meet somebody. What do you do? And to give them that one word answer that puts you in a little box so they can better understand who you are as a person from then on. And I don't like that so much, especially because I'm not sure how to answer the question. Am I a writer? Am I a performer? Am I an inventor? I don't, I don't really know. Maybe I don't want to answer them because I don't want to have to answer it for myself. But just in general, wouldn't it be nicer to ask somebody, what do you like to do for fun? The very first time you meet them, when you know nothing about them, and say, what do you like to do for fun? Because if they say, I like to watch TV and go to the gym, they're probably not that fun. No offense to anybody who would give those two answers, but maybe just for me personally, when somebody says, I say, what do you do for fun? They say, I go to the gym. I'm like, man, I must be doing it wrong because I am not having fun if I'm at the gym.
So, what's your answer to that when they say, "Well, what do you like to do for fun?"
What I like to do for fun, there's a million answers for me. The thing I am thinking about most right now, because I'm sitting by the window and it's autumn in New York, is I love to walk around and look at the trees. I love to walk around and look at the trees, especially in Brooklyn and New York. There's so many beautiful trees. There's a lot of London plane trees and ginkgos and thornless honey locusts and stuff. But there's also like, Eastern redbuds and Kwanzan cherry trees and plum trees. And you can find these just beautiful trees that explode with color around this time of year, and see the way they drop the leaves on the ground and the way that they'll just create these beautiful, colorful canopies over the streets. So that's currently at this time of year one of the things I like to do for fun, which again, if you know that about me, it tells you a little more than what the IRS, when I'm reporting to the IRS, I think.
It's and not to hate on people that maybe they are really into some shows on TV, and maybe they just like to live at the gym. So no hating on those people. They
No
could be
hating, no hating. I have
very
friends,
rich
I
personalities.
have good friends who would say, give one of those answers,
Yeah.
probably. But uh, I think you can tell when somebody really has to think about it.
Yeah.
Like, when was the last time they had fun?
Yeah.
You know, that, that, that's good for them to think about too. It's good to have fun. I think, even as an adult, I think it's important to have fun.
I think that's the premise to that's one of the premises to everything you've done, which is uh, don't lose the sense of wonder that you get that you naturally have as a kid, and
It's,
don't forget to have a little fun as an adult.
it is hilarious. Look, it's school's fault.
Yeah, for sure
I
it
don't get to
is.
say this when I'm at the school, when I visit schools, I bite my tongue a little bit, but it's the school's fault that kids don't have fun anymore. I
Yeah.
see this illustrated really vividly when I give a presentation at any school, public school, private school, Montessori school, like KISS school, any KIPS or whatever. I mean, like any school. I say, who here likes to draw? And for whatever reason, every school in the world, when they have an assembly, they put all the kids in the gym. They put the youngest kids in the front, then the second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and then all the way to the back. I say, who likes to draw? And every kid in the front row raises their hand. And like most of the kids in the second row, and then third row, a few hands there. And by the time it gets to the back, there's like one kid with their hand raised. So that means that love and that fearlessness is present in all kids. And we've seen it if you have kids or even if you've been around kids like 5, 6, 7 years. These kids are fearless. 8 years old. They're like, I can do that. I can be a basketball. They can do anything. And so that means it's us, the grown-ups, the school system, the parents, TV. It's death by comparison. It's even when we don't mean to do it, you say to somebody, oh, you're so good at drawing. And the kid that's next to them goes, well, shit, I guess I'm not good at drawing. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be gifted and talented programs. Like, I'm not saying, like, what was the Ray Bradbury story? Like, Harrison Bergeron. What's that story? You know what I was like? They put the shackles on that gleaming, Superman to make him equal to everybody else. But I just think there have to be ways where you can encourage people to do stuff that makes them happy, even if they're not good at it, even if they're not great at singing. If they love to sing, like, yeah, go for it, go to karaoke night and rip it up. Like, enthusiasm is half the battle. And I'm not a teacher. I don't have to be there every single day. I'm there for a couple hours at a time. I get to rile them up and then leave and not really face any of the consequences. But anything I can do to encourage them to express themselves and do the things that make them happy, to do the things that they like without worrying about getting a million views or getting a good grade or getting praise from someone else, all things that I am guilty of seeking myself. But if I can try to encourage them to just make stuff for no other reason than for their own satisfaction, then I will consider it a victory.
Sure. Yeah. There's a need for conformity, and conformity and creativity are sort of at odds with each other. And
Yeah, you
it's
think it's conformity? You think they just want to be like everybody else?
I think that's a part of it. I mean, if everybody else is paying attention to, the teacher and one kid is doodling, the kid who's doodling is the one who is not, who's out of place, right? I mean, that's one specific example, but I do feel like uh, the arts are underrepresented because, at least historically, schools have not seen as obvious of a benefit to including like an art-rich curriculum, and that's a massive loss.
I've seen it going the other way too, where I've been to, what do they call them? What are are they Jesuit or uh, friend schools? Or I've been to like small schools, classrooms, 10 kids. They have the same teacher from kindergarten to sixth grade, which would be a nightmare for me. I don't think I could deal with that. And they sing. Everybody sings at the beginning of every class. I went to one place and they were like, we will sing for you now. And it's a small group. It's like 12 people and me, and they're just singing at me with harmonies. And I don't know I'm like, what do I do with my hands? What am I supposed to do in this situation? And there's some kid in the back of that class that's like, can't we just do a multiple choice test? Like, I just want to do some math. So you can swing in the other direction too. You
Well,
just
I think
it's an impossible task to educate the masses. I know is that too pessimistic? It's just we got to go back to the apprentice master or mentor program, ancient system where you have one you know what you want to do. You want I don't know how it works. There was a there's some Khan Academy recently has been doing some interesting things with AI and in a way that's they're using like the Socratic method and there's this uh, God, if I could remember it, I would sound so smart right now. But there's this paradox essentially in education that says if you have one-to-one instruction, everybody does better. Obviously, right? Not a very surprising finding, but the the thought between this, I think they call it conmigo, is they can close that gap by providing both the teachers and the students with kind of one-on-one resources that help them to have that experience of having a tutor, but without just giving them the answer.
well, so that is a big part of it is kids expect to have the answers handed to them and they don't like ambiguity. And so I think that actually is part of the reason that I don't know, this is just my theory that more kids don't become that don't go into the creative arts because the creative arts requires sitting with the ambiguity and understanding that ambiguity is actually opportunity, not just a complete and terrifying lack of answers.
Well, it's
And
also
so,
just capitalism is our religion, and we can't. If somebody says they want to be a painter, you're like, no, 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 no. You gotta. How are you gonna pay for the things you're gonna want to buy?
yeah,
You know, I mean, there's an enormous amount of pressure in that regard, especially as you get towards the end of high school.
yeah, you're 100% right. I wrote a screenplay for a short film that I'm actually casting for right now, and it has to do with exactly that. It's the struggle between parents and children around what the children want to pursue if it's at odds with what the parents believe the kids should be pursuing. And
Oh man, that's such a tough. I'm not a parent, but I can imagine that struggle is never ending.
never ending. Yeah, because where do you, I mean, you as the guy that comes into the class and reads to them and gets them riled up, um, can, even at the pep rally, can sort of leave when everybody's clapping and they're all excited. Hey, we can do anything. This is
That's right.
amazing. Let's get more hands up, even in the back row. And then you leave and they get back to class and they're like, okay, hope you guys had fun. Now let's talk about math homework.
Yeah,
And
because
then it
state
just,
testing is coming up, and we need funding for this district.
correct.
Yeah, it's no joke. I realize what a privileged position I have to come in and be Uncle Fun and then leave.
Yeah,
I don't have to get them to take their medicine.
that's
But
right.
I think that's important too, you know?
For sure it is. It's
Uh,
God's work, man. You gotta keep doing it.
and I see it now because I've been doing these books the last few years where I ask kids to write me stories, to write stories and send them to me. And I've gotten to meet a couple of those authors like around the country and I can see, and the parents have told me and the teachers have told me that it does make a big difference when they feel like there is an opportunity or an invitation to create something or make something because and it's an open-ended opportunity which is always a challenge and one of the big challenges for adults too when you say all right I want to have a hobby outside I want to have a creative project outside of work and then you stare at this blank page like well what the hell am I going to do like what
Yeah.
well but what what should I do that can be equally paralyzing as the client's demands or the constructs of your job but it's it's worth figuring out. It's worth putting something down and just going with that for a while until something else comes along because the happiest people I know are the ones that make stuff they love, even if they're not good at it, even if nobody else likes it. They got a closet full of paintings they'll never show anybody and they're thrilled about it.
Yeah. Well, as Rick Rubin would tell you, you gotta put a show. You gotta show those paintings to the world.
Yeah, I'm of two minds about that. Whether you got to show everybody. I mean, yeah, I don't know. That is the necessity. I think if you want to be great, you have to show. you have to show people and you have to get feedback and you have to grow that way. But look at Emily Dickinson. She never showed anybody and she was great. So I don't know
Yeah.
if she'd be mortified maybe that we know about her or read any of the things that she wrote, but there's probably some mental health issues going on in there too.
Yeah. So let's let's go back to the story of Tamis for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Tamis, by the way, a Puerto Rican sort of truncation of Artemis, the god of war, the goddess of hunt. Sorry, not the god of war. Athena, I think was the god, but Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and wilderness. Her father took Artemis and changed it to Tamis.
well, she certainly lived up to that name when she stood in the door and said,
I
Adam.
think so. She's loosing some arrows straight into my heart.
That's exactly right. Didn't even take some, it was just one. So if you think back to that story, what would you say is the moral of that story?
The moral of the story?
Yeah.
I think the moral of the story is it never hurts to ask.
Yeah.
It never hurts to ask, and I've given this advice to people professionally, personally. If you ask nicely with humility, very rarely does anybody get mad. If you need help with something, if you want to go to something, you're trying to get access to something, or even just to connect with someone, it never hurts to ask, as long as you ask with kindness and humility.
Now,
That's it.
now you write stories for a living. You also tell stories for a living through physical objects. What do great stories have in common?
What do great stories have in common? Wow. What do great stories have in common? I think that all great stories have some element of surprise. And if from the very beginning, I guess you could tell a great story and as you know, it's a cliche story like boy meets girl, which is what my story is, right? Boy meets girl, girl meets boy. They both live happily ever after. Maybe there's no surprise there, but it's in the details. Then the surprise is in the details. Even like every great rom com, right? You got to have, even though you know exactly where it's going, maybe there has to be some surprise. Also, perhaps those aren't great stories. So I think I'm going to stick with my. I think I'm going to stick with my every great story has some element of surprise.
Do you feel like every story has to have a moral? And if it doesn't have a moral, is it still a good story?
I think a moral is very subjective. I think if most stories that are written with a specific moral in mind are didactic and hollow, that you could tell the same story to 100 people and every one of them will tell you it means something else. Like look at Lolita, right? I mean, you can or look at the Bible. Hell, like you can make a million interpretations from a single chunk of text. So my experience personally as a reader and a writer is that when you start when you want your audience to, you're trying to impart some sort of specific message or moral, or it's a fable, it's a window dressing for a sermon.
Yep. Yep. That's a good point. So I know that you were influenced and inspired by books like Strega and The Giving Tree. And I am wondering if you think of a couple of books that get storytelling really right, that just nail the art of storytelling, what would those books be?
You're looking for like picture book recommendations?
No, not necessarily. Just any book that you personally really enjoy that you think gets storytelling right. So uh, the type of the book
I'm
doesn't
going to
matter.
turn around and look at the bookshelf behind me because tend to keep my favorites close at hand.
Do it.
And I would say one of my favorite books is The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. I love that book. It is a Venn diagram of all the things that I really like too. So comic books and New York City and magic tricks, and it's just I'm not going to throw homosexuality and the Holocaust in there just because I don't want. I mean that is in the book, but that's not necessarily. Those aren't necessarily my my core areas of interest, but I do love that book. The characters are just so vivid, and the tragedy, this tragic historical situation is told with such compassion, but also with real consequence. So and then the struggle of being gay at this time, I mean, the whole thing is just really beautiful and wonderful. Great. I mean, I don't have to tell you, it won the Pulitzer Prize, so don't take my word for it.
So, last question, Adam. If you could say one thing to your 20-year-old self, what would it be?
If I could say one thing to my 20-year-old self, I tend not to focus on my regrets, but I know there's like at least 3 moments in my life where I shouldn't have said or done something that I specifically did or said, not with any sort of grave consequence, but just would have avoided a lot of awkwardness or disappointment for me or someone else. And none of them are springing to mind at this moment. But
Convenient.
I, I saw this thread on Reddit recently, and it's a sort of flippant answer, but I guess I would have said like buy Apple stock.
I was waiting for something a little deeper than that, considering how thoughtful you are.
To be honest, I don't think I don't have any great regrets. I don't know what I would have told myself at 20 that would have changed my path. I think you run into that time travel conundrum, and maybe I'm overthinking this, where now all of a sudden you become obsessed with this thing. I would probably just be like, don't worry about it, dude. Just keep, uh, have fun. That would be, keep at it. But I wouldn't have needed to tell myself that at 20, because firmly, I was firmly believing in that idea at that time. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like people that have a really quick answer to that probably have some real specific moment of regret they would like to avoid.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised uh, how many people's quick answer is just keep going. It'll be
Just keep
okay.
going. Like, you need encouragement. Like they were
Yeah,
struggling at
because
20.
there's so much uncertainty when you're younger, and there's so many things you don't have the answers for, and and a lot of people are not okay with uncertainty because they don't know. They're not sure how it's all going to turn out, and that's
Mm.
why I think a lot of people say, yes, we have to set aside the grandfather paradox, but they say to themselves, their past selves, or what they would say is, hey, it's gonna turn out okay. Like it's
You know what I would tell myself now? I've just thought of it. There was a recreation of Dr. Hooker's Impossibilities that happened at the LA Magic History Conference, and I didn't go. And I wish I had gone to that.
that
That was the
is
inspiration for Bizarre Brooklyn, actually. That trick, that performance that happened just around the corner here in Brooklyn, in Brooklyn Heights, by Dr. Samuel Hooker. And the apparatus and the whole thing was recreated. It's one of the best, most impenetrable secrets in magic. And two guys got all the stuff and made it happen again. And it lived up to all of the historical documentation, and fooled Teller and David Blaine and David Copperfield. All walked out of the room just flabbergasted. And I didn't
wow.
go for some stupid ass reason. Who knows?
But you did ask Denise to have coffee with you,
I did ask Tamis to have coffee with me. Yeah.
so I think all in all, you won. Well, Adam Rubin, that does it, my friend. Best-selling author, magician, comedian, and overall highly curious and playful individual. Thank you for being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me, Max. Thanks for the great questions. And I hope all your listeners found a clear and resonant moral to this story.
Absolutely. I'm sure they did. I think by the time this airs, the Jack in the Box puzzle, now a Kickstarter campaign that, by the way, has blown past its goal of $10,000 by something like 2,400%, will be live. So definitely check out the Art of Play for that. And that will be it for this episode. For show notes and more, head over to mospod.org. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast on. This was Moral of the Story. I'm Max Jupowski. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next time.